If we are going to be successful this season, if Amorim wants to be successful at Manchester United, then he needs to learn to adapt. This is going to be the most important thing for Amorim this season, and his ability and willingness to adapt throughout the year. And I want to start this video by talking about our last three managers and how all three of them failed to adapt and how that got all three of them sacked. Now, I'm not going to, you always need to give the caveat when you're talking about United managers of the poor ability of our board and the incompetence of the board throughout the years. Whether it was Ed Woodward, whether it was that transition period we had, and whether it is the board that we have now that I thought was going to be successful, that is now failing the fans, failing the players, and failing the whole organization of Manchester United. That being said, these three managers, and now Amorim could be facing the same risk, have all been unable to adapt, or at least adapt to a significant amount. The board, as we have seen throughout the years, will not always back the managers. They won't always get the signings that the managers want. The main reason why I believe Mourinho was sacked was because he really wanted a centre-back that summer transfer window. He finished second. He wanted a centre-back to prove that he could go a step or two further. He wasn't given that centre-back, and United really struggled. And it was mainly defensively, and Mourinho kind of made the point. I remember this game. This was one of the games that got him sacked. This was before the Liverpool game, and it was our games against Sevilla in the Champions League, and he decided to play Fellaini in the second leg when we were already down, because he wanted to play a more defensive style, because Pogba didn't give him that defensive ability he wanted, and the centre-back partnership we had at the time meant that Lindelof was our best centre-back. Mourinho wasn't backed, but at the same time, he was unwilling to adapt his team to play a more fluid style of football. He only wanted to go defensive. He wanted to play that pragmatic Mourinho type of football, and that got him sacked in the end. Ole's a different example, because I don't think Ole kind of had that as a manager, because Ole tried to adapt. It's just that Ole didn't have the football philosophy to be successful at United. Because even with Mourinho and Ten Hag, even though they failed to adapt and they failed, ultimately they both still were able to win trophies. Then you move over to Ten Hag, which is the other world-class midfielder at United, which I believe he really was. And it was now his third year, the start of his third year, he was trying to get players that didn't really fit the type of football he was trying to play, this ball possession football. He tried to get these players to play a certain type of football that they just weren't able to play. Like, a lot of the players in that team did not fit the type of football that Ten Hag wanted to play, and he could have adapted. Ten Hag could have adapted and put the better football. Now, there is also a video I am making on how the board failed Ten Hag. That's a video for another day. But Ten Hag, like, on his own, the things he could have controlled, his ability to adapt, he didn't quite do that. And now I fear that Ruben Amorim may be going down the same rabbit hole. We all know this board is incompetent. They've been incompetent for the past few years. If you are not able to adapt and get the most out of your players, the most out of the players that you currently have, you will really struggle. But now let's flesh that out and let's explain why that's the case. First of all, the 3-4-3 with the midfielders we have, I don't believe is going to work. I don't believe it's going to work, because at that midfield pivot, you have Ugarte or Casemiro and another midfielder. The other midfielder could be Menu, which I believe would give you the most balance, either Casemiro or Menu, or Ugarte or Menu. That would give you a good balance, but then offensively you're going to struggle. And you'll have to see Bruno Fernandes on the bench, which is something that should not happen. Okay, then you play Casemiro and Bruno, or Ugarte and Bruno. Now defensively, you're asking Casemiro and Ugarte to do a lot, because Bruno can't be the offensive engine and also a defensive stopper. Okay, then you move over and you think, what's the other option? Mason Mount. Maybe you play Menu and Bruno Fernandes. Menu and Mount, Bruno and Mount. That defensive stability in that midfield is also not there. So far, all the midfield options we have doesn't really work. You can't play Bruno in the defensive midfielder, because that just has too much imbalance. You can't play Bruno and Kobe Menu, no defensive ability, and you definitely cannot play Bruno and Mason Mount. Otherwise, no one is going to be able to defend. Now, I may be proven wrong, and maybe this does go on to work, but at least from what we've seen already and on paper, this is not going to work. So what is it, Amorim? What are you going to do? Are you going to continue to play this 4-3-3 the way you're playing, or are you going to adapt your tactic? Are you going to change tactics? Are you going to change formation? Are you going to allow one of your centre backs to join the midfield? What is Amorim going to do? Because at the minute it's not going to work. And then what's the other option? Go out there and spend more money on the midfielder. We have other problems to fix in this team. So what is really going to be the solution here? Again, I'm not the one that needs to come up with these solutions. I'm not getting paid millions to coach Manchester United. However, I do see the problems in this team, and they're quite easy to point out. And so far, I mean, I can make a prediction that if Amorim doesn't fix these problems, he will get sacked quite early on because the team will not perform. Now with Fernandes and Mason Mount, again, there's only one starting spot for that team, and that will be Bruno's. So now, where does Mason Mount play? You're gonna have to adapt one of these players as a winger or inverted winger. The point is, he's really going to have to adapt this season. And the final point is kind of putting all of this together, and it's a simple fact that if Amorim wants to last out the whole season, if he wants to be able to be given more money to really bring the other players he wants to bring in, this season he will have to adapt. He was given two very good players in Mbeumo and Cunha, and to be honest, I was quite lucky because I didn't think we were going to be able to do anything this transfer window. And I still don't want to divert the blame from what the board has been doing for the past few years, because I have a video coming up on that. However, if Amorim wants to succeed, and I like Amorim, I think he's a great person. I feel like he can be successful at Manchester United. He's already proven to be a quality coach by winning two league titles in 3 years with Sporting after not winning in over 18 years. Amorim is definitely a quality manager. However, if he wants to succeed, despite how bad the board is, he will have to adapt. And we'll be here to talk about it and to analyze things as the season progresses. But anyways, guys, I appreciate you watching this video until the end. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, share, do all these things to please help me grow this channel. As per usual, I'll see you soon.